Good afternoon, everybody. So today I'm wanting to talk about learning from the oldest living cultures, Indigenous knowledges for a sustainable future, and also about the sophisticated systems of science, governance, and sustainability and innovation. What does this look like as an Indigenous inclusion action plan for Australia? But firstly, it'd be amiss of me if I didn't say Mikini Budal. It is a good day today, and I'm sitting at home on my traditional lands of the Iningai people, and I'd like to acknowledge my ancestors, past and present, and those that sit with me today. I'd also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge my other bloodlines that I have, which are the Wakakabi people and also the Karakara Jungalingu people. I'd like to take and acknowledge the also all of your ancestors collectively together that have brought us together here with these important conversations around how we sustain ourselves into the future. So if we were to think about the beginning of time, and since the beginning of time, Aboriginal peoples have followed one law, a law that has been written in stone. It is carried through ceremony and embedded in our creation stories. That law remains as relevant today as it did at the beginning of the dream time. One of these great teachings is the story of the rainbow serpent or the seven sisters, a creation force that shaped landforms, waterways and living systems of our continent, Australia. It is not simply a story of the past, it is an ongoing instruction about responsibility. I want to also talk a little bit more about at the beginning of time as our people, as we wrote in stone, we maintained the data of those extinction periods and those very, very much those changing times that we as a people faced over many millennia. Are we at a turning point? Is it about innovation, tradition, and sustainability? So today I want to take you on a journey, one that stretches back over 65,000 years, to the knowledge systems of Aboriginal peoples. These are not just these are not just cultural traditions, they are sophisticated systems of science, governance, sustainability, and innovation. In a world facing climate crisis, biodiversity loss, and social disconnection, we often look forward for solutions. But what if some of the most powerful answers lie in looking both forward and deeply backward? This talk explores how Indigenous knowledges connect to education and STEM, environmental stewardship, carbon and nature repair, clean energy, climate adaptation, cultural land management, bush foods and medicines, cultural heritage, and sustainable tourism and trade. And ultimately, what this means to our shared future. I want to talk about with you all about the traditional knowledge systems, a living system. This living system of Indigenous knowledges is often called traditional, but that word can be misleading. It is not static. It is living, adaptive and evidence-based, refined over tens of thousands of years. This knowledge includes deep ecological understanding, seasonal challenges and seasonal calendars tied to local ecosystems, oral histories encoding environmental data, complex land management techniques. So, for example, Indigenous Australians don't divide the year into 4 seasons. Many groups recognise 6 or more seasons based on plants flowering, animal behaviour, and climate patterns. But let me first talk about the law circle. So the law circle and the children's fire. Our ancestors established what we call the law circle, a governance system ensuring survival, sustainability and continuity. Within the circle was another, the children's fire. Every time new law, ceremonies or survival practices was created, the elders kept their eyes on the children's fire. The question was always, will this sustain the next generation and the next? This is intergenerational governance. This is climate policy, thousands of years old. And this is the foundation of what we call under the rainbow. I want to talk about now education and STEM. Modern education systems often separate science from culture. Indigenous knowledge systems show us that this division is artificial. Indigenous STEM includes astronomy, mapping stars for navigation and storytelling, engineering, fish traps, aquacultural systems and housing design, mathematics, patterns, spatial awareness and kinship systems, ecology, species, intersection, interaction, and that land regeneration. So incorporating Indigenous perspectives into education broadens how we define intelligence and expertise. It encourages systems of thinking, builds respect for multiple ways of knowing. So when students learn both Western science and Indigenous science, they gain a more complete understanding of the world that they live in. The environment, or caring for country, is central to Indigenous knowledge. It is the concept of caring for country. Country is not just land. It includes water, sky, plants and animals, people and spirit. This relationship is reciprocal. People care for country and country sustains people. Practices include monitoring ecosystems through observation, maintaining biodiversity through active management, protecting sacred sites and species. This worldview contrasts with extractive approaches, so we don't think about how we extract from country. Instead, we ask, what can we take? We say, no, it is not what we can take, it is how do we maintain the balance. So I have a video I want to share with you that we call Napachi Napachi. And this is our caring for practice of reciprocating. You give me, I give you.
This year, NAIDOC theme, caring for country. But what does it mean, caring for country? If all you blackfellas out there in your country, you say you're blackfella, go and identify a rock hole that you clean out, help that environment a little bit. Because you're caring for country, you're caring for the animal too, eh?
You call that Napachi Napachi.
Napachi, Napachi.
Napachi Napachi.
You give me, I'll give you. Well, these young men, they came to a place called Gracevale Station and they helped maintain a rock hole. Never make fire inside the rock hole.
Yeah.
You make it out.
Okay.
About 80 months ago, traditional owners belonging to this country, they cleaned out that rock hole and the country started talking to us straight away.
Oh, oh. It's very grounding. You know, it shows that, you know, wait a second, this is actually something that can make a difference, not only in our neighbour's country, but also in our own country and also in your own country, wherever you're from. Even in the last few days that we've been putting water in this water hole, we've seen more animals come by here. I've never felt closer to country than I have in the last couple of weeks. It's amazing.
This experience has taught me the value of caring for country, the real value of why you should care for country as not only just an Indigenous person, but anybody that lives in this country, because it's a collective thought amongst us all, that we all have a sacred place that connects us through the water. Water travels all around this country, all around this continent. So, you know, it's what brings us all together.
Waterhole like your heart, and your heart's got a beat, and then the waterways and the way they go out and across the country are the veins and the arteries that feed this living organism that's out there that feeds us. And so if our heart is clogged up and dried up and silted up and can't breathe the water, and the veins can't breathe, so country's sick.
Big country, So could you imagine if each mob clean out one rock hole? Sacred site is a garden, your place of worship. That's where you got to look after it. Ngapachi, ngapachi.
Napachi, napachi. I want to now take us on a journey about carbon and nature repair. So Indigenous land management practices are increasingly recognised as powerful tools for carbon reduction and ecosystem restoration. So a key example is the cultural burning. So unlike large destructive wildfires, cultural burns are small scale, carefully timed and low intensity. Benefits include reducing fuel loads, preventing major fires, or enhancing soil health or supporting biodiversity and lowering carbon emissions overall. So today, Indigenous-led carbon farming projects generate carbon credits combining traditional knowledge with modern markets. So if we think of the Savannah fire method in the north that's just been approved by the Australian government, has been an Indigenous-led practice of reintroducing cultural burns back into country. Clean energy. So clean energy is old wisdoms and new technologies. So while clean energy technologies like solar and wind are modern, the philosophy behind them aligns strongly with Indigenous values. Use resources sustainably, minimise harm, and think long term. Many Indigenous communities are now leading solar microgrids projects, their renewable energy enterprises, and community-owned power systems. So these initiatives not only reduce emissions, but also support energy independence and economic development. Climate adaptation. Indigenous communities have adapted to environmental change for thousands of years. Their strategies include mobility and seasonal movement, diversified food sources, deep knowledge of water systems, flexible governance systems, and this resilience is critical today. Modern climate adaptation can learn from localised knowledge, long-term observations, and community-based decision making. So Indigenous knowledge reminds us that adaptation is not just technical, it is cultural and rational. Then let's move and think about agriculture, culture of land and land management. Land management is inseparable from culture. Practices such as fire management, ceremonies, songlines, the navigational and cultural maps of our country are both cultural expressions and environmental strategies. For example, songlines, they encoded routes, waterways, sources, and the water channels. They also looked at the ecological knowledge. Ceremonies reinforce seasonal cycles and responsibilities through the navigation of star systems. And when culture is maintained, land is better managed and vice versa. So let's think about then bush foods and medicines. So Australia's Indigenous peoples have developed extensive knowledge of native plants and animals. They understood how to get toxins out of plants and the methods and processes to do that. There were bush foods that is, for example, wattle seed. There are kakadu plum, which is extremely high in vitamin C, bush tomatoes, and many, many more bush food products that are now entering into our market. They also are starting to enter into what we think of in the bioprospecting space of looking for sustainable opportunities for medicinal, pharmaceutical and medicinal practices. These foods are nutrition rich, climate resilient, they adapt to local ecosystems. But more so, our traditional medicines can be used in the use of plants, are antiseptics, anti-inflammatory treatments, and healing practices. So today there is growing interest in these ethical bush foods industry in an Indigenous-led enterprises and protecting intellectual property rights. This is not just about food, it's about health, culture and economic opportunity. Cultural heritage and the value of our cultural heritage and protecting our knowledge and our identity. Cultural heritage includes sacred sites, languages, stories, arts and artefacts. These are not just historical, they are living systems of knowledge. Protecting cultural heritage preserves identity, it maintains ecological knowledge, and it supports community well-being. And our loss of heritage often means loss of environmental knowledge as well. So it is important to Aboriginal people that the protection of our cultural heritage, our sacred sites and our rock arts must be maintained into the future. We think about sustainable tourism, and sustainable tourism can easily be a harmful process for Indigenous knowledges if not managed properly. So tourism can either harm or support Indigenous communities. If we think about sustainable Indigenous tourism, which focuses on cultural respect, community leadership and environmental protection. For example, guided cultural tours, storytelling experiences and ecotourism ventures allow the participant to have a truly immersive experience and a true understanding of how to walk the two worlds as we do comfortably. So when done well, tourism can educate our visitors, it can generate a great income, and it also can strengthen the sense of cultural pride. But it must always be community-led and culturally appropriate. Then we think of trade and economic opportunities. So Indigenous knowledge is increasingly part of global markets, which is including the carbon trading, bush foods industries, arts and cultural practices, ecotourism, and how ethical trade is essential. This means fair compensation, respect for intellectual property, community ownership. So when Indigenous communities control their knowledge and resources, trade becomes a tool for self-determination and also for sustainability. So when we think about Aboriginal trade and law governance systems, we traded and governed through our songlines, through the teachings of our ancestors from many millennia ago that understood the creation of our landscape, where Uluru is a mud story in our story, where we have Dreamtime stories that talk about how we arrived as ice particles on the back of meteorites, where we dare to talk about the rainbow serpent, creating the waterways, creating the mountains, and creating the opportunities that we have today in the trading of foods, medicines, tools, and our natural resources. So in conclusion, from recognition to action, as we look ahead, the question is no longer whether Indigenous knowledge has value. We know that it does. The real question is, how do we embed it meaningfully in the systems that shape our future? To that, we must move beyond acknowledgement and towards structural change. So this is where the need for an Indigenous inclusion action plan becomes critical. Such a plan must be more than included Indigenous voices. It must recenter Indigenous governance systems, particularly the restoration of bioregional and watershed-based governance structures. For tens of thousands of years, Indigenous nations managed land not arbitrary borders, but by natural systems, water flows, ecological boundaries. Re-establishing governance through bioregions and watersheds allows us to manage ecosystems historically. It aligns policy with natural systems and it strengthens climate resilience, restores cultural authority and responsibility. But structural change also requires coordination at a national level. This is why we need the establishment of a national Indigenous peak body, an entity that is led by Indigenous communities and peoples, empowered to advocate at the highest levels, and equipped to advise government and industry, resourced to drive research, development and innovation grounded in Indigenous knowledge systems. Such a body would ensure that Indigenous knowledge is not consulted as an afterthought, but integrated as a foundation in climate policy, environmental management, education and STEM, economic development. So this is not just about inclusion. It is about leadership and partnership. Because the challenges we face today require more than just change. They require transformational thinking, thinking that Indigenous knowledge systems already embody. If we are serious about sustainability, about climate action, and about justice, then we must be equally serious about embedding Indigenous governance at every level. The future we are trying to build already has a blueprint, one that has been redefined over millennia. Our responsibility now is clear: to listen, to respect, and to act. Thank you.